All right, ladies and gentlemen, both sides have now concluded their closing arguments. So if you'll turn to page 52, if you're following along on the jury instructions.
Got it.
Really? Okay. These are some general rules that apply to your discussion. You must follow these rules in order to return a lawful verdict. 1, you must follow the law as it is set out in these instructions. If you fail to follow the law, your verdict will be a miscarriage of justice. There is no reason for failing to follow the law in this case. All of us are depending upon you to make a wise and legal decision in this matter. 2, this case must be decided only upon the evidence that you have heard from the testimony of the witnesses and have seen in the form of the exhibits and evidence and these instructions. 3, this case must not be decided for or against anyone because you feel sorry for anyone or are angry at anyone. 4, remember, the lawyers are not on trial. Your feelings about them should not influence your decision in this case. 5, your duty is to determine if the defendant has been proven guilty or not in accord with the law. Whatever verdict you render must be unanimous. That is, each juror must agree to the same verdict. 7, your verdict should not be influenced by feelings of prejudice, bias, or sympathy. Your verdict must be based on the evidence and on the law contained in these instructions. Deciding a verdict is exclusively your job. I cannot participate in that decision in any way. Please disregard anything I may have said or done that made you think I preferred one verdict over another. You may find the defendant guilty as charged in the indictment or guilty of such lesser included crimes as the evidence may justify, or not guilty. If you return a verdict of guilty, it should be for the highest offense which has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. If you find that no offense has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, then of course your verdict must be not guilty. The verdict must be unanimous. That is, all of you must agree to the same verdict. Only one verdict may be returned as to each crime charged. The verdict must be in writing, and for your convenience, the necessary verdict forms have been prepared for you. They are as follows. If y'all will look at your screens, the attorneys have agreed to help me out with this, and I appreciate everybody's help. There are multiple verdict forms in this case because of the multiple counts in the special findings. So, for example, this would be the verdict for count 1. You'll see that it starts with, we the jury find as follows as to count 1 of the charge. Check only 1 as to this count. It starts with the charge as charged on the indictment, and then the rest of it are the lesser includeds. In this case, you're going to have guilty of first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of second-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of manslaughter. The defendant is not guilty by reason of insanity, or the defendant is not guilty. You can only reach one verdict. You can't check all of them. You have to pick whichever the highest one is that's been proven, or if none have been proven, not guilty, or not guilty by reason of insanity. Those are your options. Whoever the foreperson is, you must sign and date this form. If you don't sign and date the form, I have to send you back so that you can, sign and date the form, okay? So, next up will be, and you'll see this for each of the counts. We're gonna go through this quickly, but there's a special finding form for count 1, and this is the firearm question that I read you the instruction on. So if you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, first-degree murder, second-degree murder of a law enforcement officer, or second-degree murder, then you have to answer one of these questions. Now this one, you have to answer all the questions, all right? So 1, during the commission of the offense, did the defendant actually possess a firearm? You pick yes or no. Then 2, during the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally discharge a firearm? Yes or no. 3, during the commission of the offense and as a result of the discharge of the firearm, was death caused to Debra Clayton? Yes or no. Sign and date this form, all right? Next up, we have the verdict, the special finding. If you find the defendant guilty of manslaughter, this is still count 1. There's one question on that one, which is, during the commission of the offense, did the defendant personally carry, display, use, threaten to use, or attempt to use a firearm? Answer yes or no, check, date it and sign it, okay? This is the verdict as to count 2. I'm not going to read all of it to you, but again, you've got to pick one. It starts with the charged in the indictment and works its way down, okay? Date and sign the form. Count 2 has the special findings concerning firearms. Again, you need to answer both questions. And it's as to, there's a separate special finding as to attempted manslaughter by act because it has only one question that has to be answered, if that's what you convict him of. Count 3, you pick one. He's first charge, aggravated assault, improper exhibition of a firearm, guilty of assault, or not guilty. Sign in every one of them, you've got to sign and date them. Count 4, if I'm going too fast, let me know. Same thing, all right? You starting to catch on what these verdict forms look like? All right. There's a special finding as to the verdict form for count 4. Again, it's the firearm special finding. And that applies to grand theft also, which is one of the lessers. Count 5, there's just 2 choices, guilty or not guilty. That's possession of firearm by a convicted felon. And it also has the special firearm finding if you find him guilty. All right. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to send these verdict forms back into the jury room when you all retire. All right. I'll send one set back. A separate crime is charged in each count of the indictment, and although they have been tried together, each crime and the evidence applicable to it must be considered separately and a separate verdict returned as to each. A finding of guilty or not guilty as to one crime must not affect your verdict as to the other crimes charged. In just a few moments, you will be taken to the jury room by the court deputy. The first thing you should do is choose a foreperson who will preside over your deliberations. The foreperson should see to it that your discussions are carried on in an organized way and that everyone has a fair chance to be heard. It is also the foreperson's job to sign and date the verdict form when all of you have agreed on a verdict and to bring the verdict form back to the courtroom when you return. During deliberations, jurors must communicate about the case only with one another and only when all jurors are present in the jury room. You are not to communicate with any person outside the jury about this case. Until you have reached a verdict, you must not talk about this case in person or through the telephone, writing, or electronic communications such as a blog, Twitter, email, text message, or any other means. Do not contact anyone to assist you during deliberations. These communications rules apply until I discharge you at the end of the case. If you become aware of any violation of these instructions or any other instructions I have given in this case, you must tell me by giving a note to the court deputy. If you need to communicate with me, send a note through the court deputy, signed by the foreperson. If you have voted, do not disclose the actual vote in the note. If you have questions, I will talk with the attorneys before I answer, so it may take some time. You may continue your deliberations while you wait for my answer. I will answer any questions, if I can, in writing or orally here in open court. During the trial, items were received into evidence as exhibits. You may examine whatever exhibits you think will help you in your deliberations. Some exhibits will be sent into the jury room with you when you begin to deliberate. If you need to see other exhibits or a video played, they will be provided upon request. Did you all bring the white laptop? No. All right. So going back into the jury room with you is a completely blank laptop that you can use to play the videos introduced by both the state and the defense, all right? So you can view those at your leisure in the jury room. If you have any problems, let us know immediately. Don't try to unjam it, especially with the video or the thumb drive in there, okay? In closing, let me remind you that it is important that you follow the law spelled out in these instructions in deciding your verdict. There are no other laws that apply to this case. Even if you do not like the laws that must be applied, you must use them. For 2 centuries, we have lived by the Constitution and the law. No juror has the right to violate rules we all share. Any other instructions requested by state?
No, Your Honor.
Defense? All right. All right, folks. You're going to take with you your notepads, your jury instructions. The following jurors are to remain in the courtroom. The rest of you may retire. Juror number 294, juror number 2000, juror number 367, juror number 30, juror number 474, and juror number 2191. You stay in the courtroom, everyone else retire. We'll send the exhibits and that back in a minute. We've got to gather all this. It's going to take us a few minutes, folks, all right? Got it? Yeah. Yeah, let me have this one. These are the instructions as read that can be filed. That's the verdict forms going back to the jury room. All right. I bet you've all guessed. You're the alternates in this case. But because the type of case this is, because it's a capital case, while we normally dismiss the alternates at this point, we cannot dismiss you at this point. If this jury finds Mr. Loyd guilty of first-degree murder, there has to be a penalty phase, and you have to be part of the penalty phase in case one of those jurors gets sick. You would then step in. And I don't seat the jurors in order in case you hadn't figured that out yet. You would then have to step in to substitute for one of them during the penalty phase. So that means, unfortunately, we have to keep you in sequestration until this verdict is reached. And I'll have further instructions for you. The other thing that's going to happen is if this jury does not reach a verdict today, you can't have any contact with them until they do. So the deputies are going to separate you all at the hotel. These are all things that are unique to capital cases. You all have been paying very close attention. I've been watching you all, taking notes. So the good news for you is that your day has ended and you're going back to the hotel to have a nice dinner and relax while your fellow jurors work on a verdict here. All right? Have a good evening. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. You can leave your notepads and those jury instructions here with us. They're still going to be sealed up. They're not going to be destroyed at this point. All right. Just leave them on your seats. Any other questions? All right. If you'll follow the deputies, they're going to get everything you need out of the jury room for you. But if you'll follow them, have a good evening, folks. All right, at some point during the closings, was it after the defense closing? I think so. After the defense closing, a juror wrote a question. And the question is DSM-5 in evidence? I've answered the question, and my answer is it is not, and I've signed my name. So if the attorneys want to come up here and see this, I'm going to send it back to them since they asked. So if you all want to see what the question and my answer looks like, and that will be made part of the record. All right, if the attorneys will please come check the exhibits that are going back into the jury room and make sure that nothing that's going back, that there's nothing that's not in evidence going back. The firearms will remain in the courtroom. Defense, have you checked the laptop, the wiped laptop? Is that a yes, a no, a maybe? Wiped. Have you checked the wiped laptop? You checked it, Ms. O'Shea? All right, we're good?
In regards to that question,
What question?
about the DSM-5,
Yes.
want me to say it. You gonna say it, you never get that right.
Can we get to his, we got to get this stuff back there. It's not in evidence. Mr. Loyd, I'm going to let you, I'm going to talk to you about any comments that you have about the trial in just a minute. But right now, I need to go through these exhibits and get this back to the jury, and then you can say.
I know, but before they go back to the jury, that's what this is about.
He's talking about the note, Judge.
About the question about the DSM-5, it's not in evidence.
Explain to what I'm saying.
He's saying that the jury should know that the DSM-5 discussions amongst the experts were what is in evidence. He wants you to write that.
That request is denied. The jury question has been answered. The DSM-5 is not in evidence.
You put it on record.
Before they disregard the evidence, Judge.
I'm sorry?
My client wanted me to add that you should write it, what I just requested, before they disregard the evidence.
All right, I've heard your client's request. It's denied. All right, let's get these exhibits and that laptop back to him. So take a few minutes and make sure that what's going back is what's in evidence. Where are the ones that were not admitted? Yes, we're going to pull out the buggy that contains the evidence that was not admitted so that you can make sure there's nothing in there that was admitted.
There is a password in the bottom left, it's not sticky, bottom left of the laptop. I don't know if you want to tell the jurors that the password is there, and log in.
Okay.
Oh, 10? Yeah. Oh, okay, good.
I've shown the laptop, the defense, Your Honor, they've agreed it's clean, there's nothing on it.
All right, great.
Again, the password in the bottom left, there's an attachment that you have to plug the USB drive or an external CD player if you want to play the CDs.
All right.
Into the adapter.
Where'd Claire go? We're going to have you explain that to the deputy who talks to the jury and let her tell them. You'll do it? All right. Officer Davis is going to handle it.
Sorry? Yes.
Your Honor, the state's reviewed all the evidence, and it's acceptable to go back to the jury.
Defense? All right. I think that's it then. Court's in recess pending the verdict of the jury.
Just give me a few minutes, let me get this back.
No problem. And I'll need to see the attorneys on a scheduling issue, please.